All right, everyone, welcome to our monthly webinar series for The One Thing. Every month, we sit down with an author who we believe has a story and a book that is aligned with the principles of The One Thing. And earlier this year, I heard this insane story that we're going to tell today, but this is really a story of perseverance that hopefully most of us have never had to persevere at this level. But I remember hearing Gary, who was in a mastermind, he said the number one reason that people do not succeed at living the one thing over the long run is they don't endure the monotony of success. And that's because success is not about doing the latest productivity trick or downloading the latest app. It's none of that. It's about having clarity on a handful of things that you just do again and again and again and again and again over time that ultimately leads to extraordinary results. The challenge with that is that, frankly, it's boring. The novelty eventually does wear off. And it's like you start living the one thing and, you're all excited at the beginning, but after a few weeks, it gets a little bit boring. And then eventually it feels like the world is flat out attacking you. How many of you have ever experienced that, where it just seems like you started doing a 411, or you've gotten clarity, you started asking what's my one thing, or you started trying to time block, and all of a sudden you fast forward a few weeks and it literally feels like the world is attacking you? If so, put yes in the questions box. This is going to be interactive. How many of you have experienced that? Yeah. Well, the guy that you're staring at here in the lovely blue shirt with the blonde hair, has done something that probably most of us have not done. He has climbed the nose of El Capitan, which, if you think of Mount Everest, tallest peak in the world, if you think of that, that is the penultimate when it comes to mountaineers. Is that for people who are climbers. And not only has he climbed it once, he's actually climbed it over 100 times. And so the question is, why? And what has that looked like? What does it look like to truly go on a road to mastering something as complex and as difficult as that? So Hans, I'm going to unmute you and welcome to the webinar, my friend.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm honored to share stories with you guys.
So first and foremost, what got you into climbing to begin with?
College student in the dorms, and someone said, "Who wants to go out and try this?" And I'm like, I raised my hand. I'll go. This sounds interesting, and pretty much fell in love with it my third or fourth time out.
Yeah. Now, out of curiosity, how many of you who are here are climbers? If so, put yes in the questions box. If not, put no. That way we get a sense of who the audience is. Oh, really? We've got some climbers here. Okay.
All right. My fan base followed in.
All right. Yeah.
How many real estate agents do we have out there?
Shockingly, the vast minority of our audiences are agents. But give us a sense of what it means to climb something like El Capitan.
I show pictures in my shows to try to explain to people, and we'll put the Empire State Building up there, or the Dubai Tower, or the Eiffel Tower, or something, and place it next to El Cap. And El Cap is 1.25 times the tallest building in the world. And you got to imagine the Dubai Tower is twice the height of a New York skyline, right? And so El Cap's even taller than that. So when you walk to the base, your head just keeps going back to look up, and it's daunting is the understatement of the planet when you're looking at the face of El Cap. It's way up there.
And I've actually got an image I pulled up on the Google machine, which this is what we're looking at. So if you're saying that, New York skyline's here, Dubai's here, and here's you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, the Dubai Tower is about 500 feet shy of being as tall as El Cap. Pretty amazing.
Wow. So I get it. Some people may say, okay, this is something that I want to try. And what percentage of the people that even attempt this actually make it to the top?
Probably 75% of the people who start at the bottom make it to the top. Those other 25% might fail within the first few hours or 1 or 2 days up on the wall. And yes, they do camp on the wall on ledges or porta ledges that they might bring. So when you try to tell people what's the average amount of time someone would take to climb a wall like this, well, it's infinite, right? Because some people fail to.
Yeah. And if for the people that do actually make it to the top, give us a sense of how long that takes.
The average this past season would be 3 or 4 days. They're going to spend 3 nights on the wall.
And you've held the world record for fastest climb. How long did it take you to get to the top at your best?
At my best, 2 hours, 23 minutes, and 46 seconds. Yeah.
Okay. So what could take some people days, you did in a matter of hours.
That's right. And mind you, my story was pretty long. So 29 years ago, I failed to get up El Cap, and 28 years ago, it took me 2.5 days to climb the route. So I've had a long path to get to where I'm at.
So, and I'm curious because so many of our people in our audience are very professionally focused, business oriented. And we talk a lot about setting big goals and working toward those big goals. For you in the climbing world, this is a massive goal to set, and you fail. It then takes you several days. What was it that had you keep going at this thing?
I think it's in this particular industry, it's experience really rewards you in climbing. When I was very strong and 26 years old, it took me 2.5 days to climb the route. 20 days or 20 years later, when I was older, feebler, whatever, but more knowledgeable, it took me 2.5 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a tiny fraction of the amount of time, all because I learned how to handle ropes. I learned how to get through logistical sections of the route, not because I was stronger here. I was stronger from here up. I just knew how to move through the systems of pendulums and all these other odd things you have to do to climb a 3,000-foot wall.
So what I'm hearing is models and systems. It wasn't necessarily your natural ability that changed. It was you had models and systems that, when leveraged correctly.
Yeah, a lot of people have commented. I mean, my degree in business is production operations, and what we use now is Six Sigma. We would be American Product and Inventory Control Society, right? I happen to know all those things that Six Sigma does now about eliminating inefficiencies and things. And so I would be really a geek about analyzing how to climb a pitch and how to transfer between cracks and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah. So I've heard Gary say that if you wanted to live an extraordinary life, it requires that you master something. And it only has to be one thing, like literally over your life. If you only mastered just one thing, that could lead and be the difference between extraordinary and ordinary. What is it for you? How has this played into your journey?
Well, the nose is the Everest of rock climbs, and so most people would do it once, right, and be done with it. And so I've definitely gone down this niche, this very small sort of thing. When I'd travel the world, people would come up to me and say, "Hey, congratulations," and I'd be like, "What for?" And because you climbed the nose of El Cap in record time. For years it was 8 hours, and then 7 hours, and then 5 hours. It's only the last few years that it's dropped under 3 hours, and even more recently 2 hours this past year. But because it is I don't know how to say it, like Warren Buffett is kind of the king of investment. If you knew Warren Buffett, you're something in the investment world. If you climbed El Cap and you have the record for climbing the nose, the most famous big wall route in the world, you're recognized as a leader, a credible multi-pitch big wall climber. And it just opened so many doors for me to focus on that one thing. Right. Mm-hmm. I got introduced to the very best people in all facets of climbing because I was the very best at my chosen discipline in climbing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how many different times have you held the world record for fastest climb?
8 times in the last 25 years.
Okay. So I can imagine it's one thing to break the world record at all, yet you didn't hold it. Like, how does it feel when you get to that level and then all of a sudden, boom, it's taken?
Well, it's different at different times in my life. When I was younger, it was broken by so much I thought it was impossible to break again. And then I would just keep thinking, whenever someone broke it, it wasn't to me that I was injured or hurt over that. I was like, oh, this is calling attention to the fact that it's a worthy goal. We don't think of that in like the marathon or the 100-meter dash. It's like just a given. That's a worthy thing. But in climbing, to have the very best people from Europe come and spend $1 million filming budget to get the record on the nose. Like, wow, they think it's important. And since they broke the record, I'm going to go back and see if I can take it back from them. So having it broken to me meant what I'm doing is important, purposeful, if you will, in our community.
How did it change your approach every time that you set the record again and then it got broken? How did it change your mindset in terms of your approach?
I think every time that I went back to it, I did, I guess, lean on systems and models more as I went along. At first, it was just a brash, let's run up this thing and see how fast we can do it. And then like, oh, those guys are doing something different than us. I would go and ask the enemy, the rivals, what they did. And then I'm like, let's try that. So I'm very much into kind of getting out of the box. And like, if somebody, quote, beats me or runs something better than me, why recreate the wheel? Go ask them, right? And so I actually started pulling out the topographical maps that we use to chart the route, and we would look at it and say, who's going to lead this part? How are we going to get through this section? So we would plan a lot more than we did early on.
And I just found another image that I wanted to share with people to give people a sense. It's, I think about when I go to my gym and there's a rock climbing wall and they got the nice big things that you hold on to. I don't see much to hold on to here.
Well, this happens in granite, right? You're climbing a vertical crack and it gets smaller and smaller and then it disappears. And like there's no way to go up. There's blank rock ahead of you. And so, I wasn't the originator of this, but like, hey, let's just pound a pin in or take a piece of gear and swing over to another crack that starts 10, 15 feet, 20 or 50 feet to the right and go up that crack until it ends. So you're obviously not just grabbing a jug and pulling up. You're doing a lot of problem solving up there, from vertical crack climbing to horizontal ledges to overhanging roofs. And the pioneers came up with all sorts of inventive ways to climb these walls. Here, I think we're seeing, who are we seeing here? Yeah, this guy has just fingertips in the crack, right? And this particular crack ends about, a couple meters above where this guy finishes, and he has to swing into the crack off to the right that he's looking at. So
it's amazing.
Not to mention hold his mental focus together that there's 2,500 feet of air below his feet, right?
Yeah.
And for people looking at this photo, that is not a broccoli patch down there. That is full-size pine trees and oak trees down there.
Let me get back to that. That's crazy.
This is approximately where I fell in May earlier this year and hit a ledge.
So let's talk about that. How many years had you been climbing without ever having a rescue?
This is my 35th year of climbing.
Okay.
And never been rescued. I'm sure I've had my bumps and bruises, even broke a tooth when I smashed my face against the wall, but nothing much more than overuse injuries and maybe rope burn here and there. But this past spring, I fell almost very close to where this image is shown and hit a ledge that was 15 feet below me, broke my left tib and my right heel.
So to give people a sense, go back to before the fall. You're going up. I remember Abe sharing, for people who know, Abe's the president of the coaching company we're in partnership with. You were placing a pin or a nut. What exactly was happening?
Placing a nut. Here we go. This exact nut, actually, this little piece of metal that's the thickness of my finger. This was being placed in a crack. So you're seeing it kind of wedged in a crack. And you typically test this, which I did. You hang on it and while you're on something solid below, and I stood up on it and this little nut popped out and I slid down and hit the ledge 16 feet below me. My rope was, at that time, had 18 feet of slack out. So had it only had 13 feet of slack, I would have stopped. The rope would have stopped me just prior to the ledge, but we just had a little bit too much rope out. And then I, after hitting the ledge, fell off the ledge and was hanging on the rope safely, I guess. But I could see my left leg was bent at an angle, and I wasn't going to be continuing on that climb.
So I'm imagining you're this high up, you fall, you break a leg, you break a heel. What goes through your mind?
Well, the first thing was I can't stand up, so I sat down on the ledge. But Abe Shreve pointed out that he was just stunned that what I did was I did what I could do. I didn't I didn't cry. I was in a bit of pain, but he said, Hans, I was amazed. All you did was think about what you can do. And maybe he even thought in his mind, the one thing I can do. But I pulled out my phone. I called 911. I was connected to the Rangers. In fact, Abe was actually around underneath the roof when I fell. He heard me and he came around the roof maybe a minute and a half later. And he's like, what are you doing on the phone, Hans? And I'm like, oh, I'm calling the Rangers. I broke both my legs. And he's just like, I didn't know what else to do. So I did the one thing that I could. I started the process of getting us rescued.
What did that look like?
Well, from the look on Abe's face, it looked, I think, hysterical. He was just like, I can't, he was just, he was astounded, I think, but he was so calm and just started contributing to the actions that we needed to do to get me out of there. Mm-hmm. I discussed with Rangers for a little bit, should we go up? Should we go down? Should we sit where we're at? I don't know how many details I want to, share with these people that they're interested in, but, you can helicopter rescue somebody off that wall if conditions are allowed, but it was too windy that day, so that wasn't a possibility. Mm-hmm. We did something that I really don't like doing, and we decided with Rangers that what we should do is sit and wait for them to get there, which is probably the worst possible thing for me. I don't want to sit still. But packaged me up as best we could, and Abe actually successfully lowered me down 2 rope lengths to a better ledge where there was actually some other climbers that were coming by, and we waited there for the 5 hours, and they arrived with a litter and hauled me to the summit.
So just for visual references, you're about how high? About this high?
We were 2,500 feet, so 3/4 of the way up the route.
So about here, and basically they had to come from the top, lower down, and then pull you back up?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, and then Abe just went down, correct?
Yeah, that was pretty amazing that to rappel that wall with a partner is no small thing. And for Abe to do it at night, because night had fallen by the time they started hauling me out at 7, 8 p.m., he had to lower down 5 rope lengths on his own and get to a ledge where he could spend the night sleeping, and then the next morning he had to rappel the other, 1,500 feet off to the ground. So I was just like giving Abe not the riot act, but Abe, you be safe because I don't want you hurt because I got hurt,
Yeah. So I'm trying to get into the mindset because I'm imagining you've had an incredible career. You have a bad fall. I mean, I can't even imagine what goes through your mind when you fall at that height, break both legs, yet we were talking, how many months later were you climbing it again?
I climbed El Cap November 12th, so 6 months and 9 days after the accident.
Okay. How many of you have broken a leg before who are on here, out of curiosity? I feel like when I broke my fibula, it was like 4 months till I was even running again.
I don't get to see these answers, do I?
Yeah. Ted says, broke my leg in a climbing fall as well. Yep. What had you go back?
I suppose my community. I've been fortunate that I've adventured with Eric Weinmeyer, who's the blind person who's climbed the 7 summits or the 8 summits. I've got to adventure with people missing a leg. I've got to adventure with people paralyzed from the waist down. And by adventure, it may be biking, it may be kayaking, climbing El Cap. I've climbed with a deaf person, climbed with a mother-daughter team. I've climbed with I mean, someone in their 60s and 70s, so old, young. And this community, like, there's no excuse really to not go out and, in our case, climb, but adventure, whatever it might be. And so you could call it pressure on me, high expectations, but it's also, I have all these great frames of reference that there is no excuse to not get back out there. You know? And for me, you know, it so happens a great friend of mine, Quinn Brett, was paralyzed from the waist down last year from a fall, and she's struggling, but she's getting back at doing what she can. She can't climb as she did before, but she's gone and got a hand cycle. And as you know, her arms are getting huge, which is great and strong, but it doesn't look good for her being able to use her lower body again. But she's got this mindset of going out and doing what she can, doing the one thing she can do, right?
How does all this, I mean, when you then think about everything that you've learned in your career as climbing and you channel that into the business world, what are some of the parallels?
Well, from this incident, there's setbacks, right? There's definitely setbacks. They could be external, like 2008, we had an economic crisis. They could be just your business. A key employee quits out of the blue, right? Or worse than quits, how about they start a business that's in competition with yours, right? So there's setbacks. And I think that the thing that's revealed with me is, yes, this was a big setback, 2 broken legs, but I've had things where it starts to rain on us unexpectedly and we need to retreat. I've had things where somebody twisted their ankle but could exit out of the wild on their own or with my help. So smaller things. And I think what Abe had said to me was so important is that, and maybe it's built into me, is that you don't focus on, oh my gosh, I've lost this employee, or oh, there's new competition. You just, what can I do now with this new circumstance to move forward?
How many of you in your careers have faced a massive setback where you couldn't see a way forward? How many of you have been in that moment? If so, put me in the questions box. Mara's like, yes. Yeah. I love what you're saying, Hans. And it makes me think about in the one thing, there's this page 134, there's this image of the iceberg. And just like when you see a real iceberg, all you're seeing is the tip, vast minority of the total mass. And for most people, that's their productivity, right? The things that they do and the results that they get. Yet you can't really be productive if you don't have priority, and that's below the surface. And you can't really have priority if you don't have purpose. How much of this has been a matter of purpose and fulfillment for you?
I bet there's people out there going, what's so purposeful about climbing a rock?
I was wondering that. That was going to be my next question.
I can say without a doubt the number one thing that's kind of kept me, I guess, pursuing what I have been is I give, in addition to climbing, I go and share the stories about climbing, from kindergartners to the Rotary to, pharmaceuticals and bankers to college kids. And I've had people come up to me 8, 10, 15 years after they had met me for the first time and said, I saw you speak in Kansas or New York or whatever, and because of what you said, I changed my job and I became a Doctors Without Borders. Or, I went to China for 2 years because I just wanted to go and commit to something new. And some of them, it was something less purposeful, if you will, that they took a sabbatical and went climbing for 6 months. But that I had an effect on people, and I'll argue a positive effect, but that warms me to no end, and it kind of roundabout inspires me back to do more. So, I mean, you can argue that, starting a small business that's a bakery and stuff and employs 3 people is purposeful because of that. You've given a living to 3 or 4 people and you're providing healthy baked goods to folks. Maybe gluten-free, maybe not, but to others that might seem not so purposeful. Why don't you go to Ethiopia and put shoes on kids that are starving or whatever, give food to them. I don't know. I think what we started this whole conversation with is, what's the one niche thing that you went on? I chose the nose of El Cap, and I chose to dig deep and be the master or the expert at that. And because of that, I've actually I've been invited to go to Ethiopia, and I've been invited to go on things where I'm helping in more normal, purposefully humanitarian ways. And some of that's by chance, but when you're seen as the expert, or you're super successful at one thing, people realize they want to involve you with what they're doing, because they figure you're going to have that drive to be, master what they're doing, or help with your expertise in what they're doing.
Yeah. You keep coming back to this word of mastery. And when I think about what that means, I mean, this is one of the 3 commitments in the one thing: following the path of mastery. And I remember hearing Gary say, the moment that you stop viewing mastery as a destination that you arrive at and start to view it more as a journey that you go on, it starts to feel achievable and attainable. I've been in that role where I think like, oh, mastery, like it's something that I get to someday from now. Like I've reached mastery, versus realizing, no, this is a perpetual journey. And just hearing you talk earlier about what first took you several days, that could then be 8 hours, that could then be 5, 3, less than 3. Every single time there was a quote ceiling of achievement, you just had to look up and realize there was another level to get through that, you had to have new models and systems that could let you break through. And the moment you did, guess what happened to the ceiling? It just got raised again, and just repeats again and again and again.
Yeah.
I feel like in our businesses and in our lives, whether it be your marriage, your relationship with your kids, your health, your spirituality, all of us are at a ceiling of achievement somewhere. And it's us relying on our natural abilities that keeps us there, when we could be doing what you've done, which is identify those models and systems and figure out how we get to that next level.
I wanted to point out, like, we see this picture and we see it looks like a point, but actually behind this, the earth goes up another 400 feet very gently. And, we jokingly call this the big ditch. And what I'm getting to is that when you climb El Cap, or one of the smaller cliffs in Yosemite Valley, all you've done is climbed out of a ditch. You're not on a summit. You're not on the top of mastery of anything. So you better enjoy the journey. You better enjoy that while, because when you get to the top, you're not actually at the top. You've just climbed out of the ditch, and there's still, all sorts of lesser glamorous terrain yet to go before you're back at your car door, I guess. Yeah.
Well, you held up your book on the nose. Talk to us a little bit about what that's about.
Well, that marks the ridiculous 100th ascent. Like I said, most people will climb Everest once, and most people will climb the nose once, and this is marking my 100th ascent of the route. And my co-author, Jamie Moy, correctly answers, what is the book about? It's the answer to the question, why would you do that? Why would you climb Everest 100 times, or the nose of El Cap 100 times? So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Who should read the book?
I'd love to say everyone, right? Because we want to sell lots of books, but it is a collection of stories of why I chose to climb it with a blind person. And your title of this webinar is brilliant. Like, if something's hard, why would you do it again? Mm-hmm. I've had a feeling at the top of the nose, or the top of El Cap, because there's other routes, where I'm completely exhausted. I look like I've been shoveling dirt and stalls for 20 hours, and I'm filthy dirty, but I've got a smile on my face of contentment that I pushed myself to the limit, and I completed what I wanted to start. I've climbed out of a ditch. Yeah. And when I feel that, and I look down and I see all that terrain below me that I've gotten through, I wanted to share that with people. And yes, I've climbed the route 100 times, but what is incredible, I've climbed it with 88 different people to do that. And I've gotten to experience that feeling again by just proximity to them and helping them with that journey. It's really cool. And I think it's one of the reasons a lot of climbers become guides is because they're showing people sometimes the most physically exciting thing they've done in their life. And that rubs off on you, right?
That's cool. That's cool. There's quote in the one thing that people do not decide their futures. They decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. So I'm curious, what have been some of those keystone habits that you've acquired that led to all the results that you've gotten?
I watched some of your other webinars, and there's a gentleman, I can't pick his name, about the atomic habits, right?
James Clear.
James Clear. And it's interesting that he says, you talk about the real estate agent who makes the big sales and is getting all this money. You don't talk about the 100 million cold calls that he's doing every morning or whatever, the day-to-day grind, the habit of making those sales calls or those introduction relationship calls. They don't tell the story of that. They tell about the $7 million homes that he sold in 1 week.
Mm-hmm.
So, back to the original question is like, how do you form these habits to reach something extraordinary? And I don't know if it's chicken or egg, but I found that this extraordinary achievement or experience I've had on the nose made me look and go, what habits can I do in my daily life so that I get to go back and go for a goal like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And believe me, I feel very fortunate. I've found something that incredible that motivates me to get up at 3:30 a.m., climb at the gym in the city of Oakland or San Francisco or Berkeley for 3 hours, and then go to my cubicle job in an architect engineering firm for 8 hours. How do you do that? Well, I found a goal that feels purposeful to me, right?
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about your morning routine, because you were sharing this with me earlier, and I thought it was very relevant.
So when I was going for the record on the nose, the couple different times I would get up at 3:30 a.m. I'd go to the gym and I'd try to post in this one thing. Well, the one thing I need to do is work on my hand crack technique, which is putting your hands in a crack. And a lot of people don't have that conditioning on the back of their hands. And so I would do that because I needed to do that, right? And then now I need to do aerobic conditioning for my legs because it's a full body workout to climb El Cap. And I knew that we could climb the route in 3 hours or so. So I'd work out as hard as I possibly could for 3 hours. That was my morning ritual when I was going for the record. And when my goal for that week or something is that I'm doing a keynote speech at the end of the week, I would get up and I'm like, okay, I'm going to review the keynote speech. I'm going to look at certain things in it, and I'm going to spend not 3 hours probably, but a half hour on this because I want to break it up and be able to hit it every day, right? So
what I'm hearing you say is you got up and you just did whatever that one thing was first. And that one thing has moved and shifted over time, but it was always clarity about what mattered most and doing it first.
Yep. And I think I mentioned to you, like I'm human. Sometimes I don't have that great goal that excites me. So I try my best in the morning to find something. Recently, this woman that I'm seeing, Lisbeth, she's like, why don't you just write for 5 minutes in the morning? I'm like, oh gosh, okay, so I'll write. And well, what do you write? Well, that you have to put something on paper. You just have to. And I'm a big fan of aphorisms, short, pithy sayings, short quotes of positive. So like I would just start writing down ones I knew. And then eventually I'd be like, oh wait, here's a new thought about that. And so I think just having a ritual, even if I don't have the end goal, now because I did that, I'm like, wow, I'm going to convert this to things that I'm going to use for punchlines on my keynote speeches or starts of my keynote speeches. Anybody out there that's a professional speaker or has to speak in front of people, there's one thing you got to know is start strong and finish strong.
That's all they remember.
So when we come to the 59, 1 minute before the hour, we got to be ready here.
That's good. That's
Something
good. I love
strong.
it.
Now there's pressure on us.
I'd love to open it up for the people who are here. This is a chance for you to ask Hans anything that you have. I've got more questions, but I want to make sure that this is serving you. So please go ahead and put your questions in the questions box, and we'll be sure to answer them.
If it all gets slow, I had a couple people ask me before, but let me know.
Yeah. Oh, please go.
I mean, the big question is, well, what's next? If you've
Yeah.
broken your legs, you've set this record on the nose. So for those who don't know out there, I am a father. I have a 18-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old boy, and what's next with them is like, getting them through school. That's a big thing. So yes, does a person who climbed El Cap become, a husband and father? I have. And my son climbed El Cap with me summer before last. My daughter is threatening to do that. So those sort of things are kind of next on my list, is certainly paying as best attention I can as a good father to them, and climbing with other people on El Cap, helping them with their goal through it.
Mm-hmm.
And using these lessons in business coaching. I found I've got a bunch of people I've started coaching in climbing, and they asked me to coach them in life. And working with Abe Shreve, we're starting to coach people in business, and we just have an amazing wealth of resources with Keller Williams and Gary and all these folks. Their credentials in business are just amazing. So
yeah, which for people who have not connected the dots, you've heard us talk about One Thing Coaching for a long time. The reason that it didn't come to market is we needed somebody who could lead that coaching company, and that person is Abe. So it's a separate entity, and Hans is one of the coaches inside that organization. So all the models that we talk about on the side of the One Thing are things that they coach to, as well as additional things. So if it's ever of interest on the coaching side, go to theonething.com, click on the training tab, and you'll see coaching there. You can submit interest. And if you just love Hans and you want some Hans in your life, you can request to work with Hans.
I'll coach you to get up El Cap in 2 days.
Yeah. Well, and that's how
maybe
that's
a
how
few
you,
hours if we work at it for a while.
and that's how you and Abe met, by the way, because Abe is a student of coaching, and he realized as a climber, he's had coaches in business. Why not have the best person in the world at climbing El Cap coach him? And what started as a coaching relationship turned into a great friendship, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It was pretty amazing. He because I have a business degree and been involved in so many different businesses, it was really interesting. He insisted that he pay me my full rate and not be a barter and all this. And it's quite interesting how accountability between a coach and a client goes. And when I think about, well, who coached me to get through my world of architect engineering, and I now manage a gym and wear several other hats in real estate and different things. And finding those goals, it's really interesting how in climbing you have a coach who is called a partner, right? An accountability partner. In business, often people don't have partners, right? They're going alone. It's certainly in entrepreneurial places.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
Although
there was a great question that came in. So many of us, it's just natural human behavior to avoid discomfort. Yet here you are with a very long track record of not only just you don't avoid it, you're going straight at it. What's your mindset when you're looking discomfort straight in the face?
Well, there's different types of discomfort. I mean, my legs are sore or my muscles are sore versus the discomfort of, I don't know, well, falling and breaking your legs. That's not something you're trying to go into, but cold conditions, hot conditions, things like that. And my mindset is it worth it? When at the end of the day, my mouth's parched, I'm out of water, and I'm, hours from the trailhead before I get back. Is it worth it? And because I've been doing this sort of adventure for 35 years, I'm a pretty good judge about going into it. What's the outcome going to look like? And for me, probably one of the best things, as I had mentioned earlier, is feeling exhausted, feeling that discomfort, if you will, and knowing that what I did in my case, looking back on 3,000 feet of granite, it was worth it. not only for the physical endorphin high of it and pointing at that rock and say I climbed it, but the stories that come from it and really the lessons I can use as you said, a launch pad to go to the next thing. Often in Yosemite, climbing El Cap, the launch pad is then to go to Everest or to go to Patagonia or to go to Baffin Island.
Yeah.
Or to use those lessons in your business.
Abe's on, and he has a question for you. What would you say to the person who says, well, of course you can do it, Hans. You're an Olympic level athlete, but I'm not.
I'd say, I don't know what your level of fitness is, but there's something you can do next week that you couldn't do this week. And this may seem a bit like models and systems, but measuring wherever you're at, I mean, you have to have the self-confidence to know that I just want to improve on my previous self. So measure where you're at now and see if you can improve on it. Who cares if you can do 1 pull-up while Hans can do 20 pull-ups? You should be shooting for 1.5 pull-ups. And if you can't do any pull-ups, then hang off the bar, for a longer amount of time. If you can't hang off the bar, then, use your feet on a small, molding or something. But these things, like, you have to have the self-confidence that you want to improve yourself, whatever level you're at. It doesn't matter that other people are below you or above you. And this is a great point. Think of not the person who's not the Olympic athlete, but the person who's so good, they're above everyone else. Like, what do they do if everyone else is down here? Well, they measure where they're at and try to improve. Don't just give in. Oh, I'm better than everyone else, I'm not going to try to improve.
I love that. Well, there's two things there. I mean, that's very much the path of mastery, and it's also the accountability cycle. It's amazing how when you just start tracking things, start measuring things, what changes. Jay, my partner Jay, has a goal of creating 10 net worth millionaires in his lifetime. And ultimately, he and his wife looked up, I think it was last year or the year before, and said, well, what are we actually doing? What activities are we actually doing that would lead to that result? And so they started a wealth building community. And we come together once a month and to talk about building wealth. And you have to publicly declare what your net worth is. And they track whether it goes up or down. And just the fact that we come together once a month and publicly have to look each other in the eye and say where we stand and know whether that's up or down has been probably the single driver behind the increase in net worth that's happened in that community. So I would challenge in fact, let's make this interactive. What's the one area of your life that you really know you need to be making progress in? Just one. You only get to choose one. Let's start there before you earn the right to look anywhere else. If you could only focus on one area, what's the one area you really need to make some changes? Share it in the questions box. Andy says health, marital conflict. Yep. Good. Fitness, says Laura. Health, says Christine. Lots of fitness people. Well, that's very timely considering the time of year. So if you could only measure one thing, what would it be? What could you start measuring that if you just measured that one activity consistently over time would make everything else easier or unnecessary? What would that be? Share it in the questions box. Ellen says career direction. Good. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Hans?
I'm thinking about measuring what's the hardest of all those they listed to me to measure. And I mean, like, marital health. How do you measure that, right? And Abe Shreve is amazing. He has scorecards on everything. I'm like, okay, how many arguments did you have this week? How many please, thank yous, and I love you, dears, did you have this week? I'm sure he can break it down for you, but the whole point is you can measure anything. If you want to see change, I think you need to measure where you're at.
Yeah.
Find a way.
Well, and that's, I think, where that focusing question comes in. Like, what's the one thing you can do such that by doing it would make everything else with that marriage easier or unnecessary? Well, we would fight less. Okay, well, what would you do instead? In moments when there's tension, we would pause and we would seek to understand, okay, well, how many times are you fighting on a weekly basis? Track it. Can you fight less? Or how many times are you coming from curiosity when instead of just lashing out? I'm speaking from some personal experience, by the way. What other questions do you guys have? Matt Townsend calls that pre-planning your fights. That's so good. That's so good. Yep.
Why isn't he thinking of some more positive thing, pre-planning the armistice or something? I don't know.
I don't know. What other questions do you guys have before we wrap? And while those come in, if people wanted to check out your book, Hans, where can they get it?
OnTheNoseBook.com, or just
Yep.
search my name on Amazon. It's there as well.
Yep. And for those of you who, go ahead.
A topic that I think might be on lots of people's mind is these two big movies, these big documentaries that came out recently, Free Solo on Alex Honnold and The Dawn Wall, Tommy and Kevin.
Good. Talk about it.
Remember we talked about the person who's way up here above everyone else, as opposed to like, how does the person who's not the Olympic athlete, do these things? I think Alex is a great example of, he's above the field, he's above everyone. He could sit on his laurels and not do anything. Is Alex the Steve Jobs of climbing? Is he the Elon Musk? In a lot of ways, I think he is. Nobody can launch a rocket into space and make electric cars that is a successful company from nothing. Nobody can do that, right?
Yeah.
Yet Elon Musk did that. Nobody can bring Apple back from the grave, and Steve Jobs did that, right? There's exceptional business people that do it by the book, and there's exceptional mountaineers and climbers that do it by the book, right? And Alex has really just kind of come out and blown all that away. Is Elon Musk crazy? I don't know. Is Alex Honnold crazy? Probably an equal question for both, and maybe they need to be to do what they did.
Well, going down that vein, how do you start to believe that you are capable of more than you might perceive possible?
Well, for me, I mentioned earlier, I'm fortunate the community around me. A friend of Eric Weimer who's climbed the 8 summits, and he has, as he jokes, a person without sight. If he can do that, I can do, I don't know, anything, right? And how do you believe? Find positive examples around you in what it is you want to achieve, and see where they came from. Ask them where they came from. I bet it's from meager or humble beginnings, and they just slowly went towards that goal. They did the one thing that brought them to that perhaps impossible goal, which became believable and then achievable.
Yeah.
I tell people, like, say it is going to happen first, which seems kind of normal. Say it, but then start believing it, and then it'll happen.
Well, I think there's also something to be said to which you keep alluding to, the fact that your environment supports your goals. And when we look at our environment, the people who are in it play a massive amount of that. And I would just ask people, who are the 5 people you're the most time with right now? Are they people who think big? Are they people who naturally look out at what others may doubt and ask the question, well, how can I do that? What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, that would be possible? Be careful about who you surround yourself with. And I think that's one of the things that we've really respected about the community that we've built behind the one thing, is that these are people who are not interested in the status quo of waking up and checking email and sitting in meetings and getting distracted all day. They believe that there is a better way to go through their careers and through their lives. And we collaborate together. So I hear you come back to that community, and I would challenge people, especially this time of year. You're going to set your goals for next year. You're going to look at what your habits are. How many of you have an opportunity to form habits or to top grade the people that you surround yourself with? And I would go down there. Andy has a great question. What kept you focused on El Cap rather than diverting your attention to other things? Like, especially like you just mentioned, the ability to be that high up with your hands in these cracks and just to remain focused. How do we go about strengthening that muscle?
I think there's probably 2 questions there. How do you remain focused when you're up there. Why did I remain focused on El Cap, perhaps?
Let's go down the focus vein. Like for the people, because we see it in the companies all the time where it's just so easy to get distracted. What does it look like to strengthen your focus?
Gosh, it's like physical meditation in the best form. I mean, I tell people all the time, we have ADD kids, we have kids with special needs, we have kids with problems with criminal justice come climbing. And when a kid, and I use a kid example because they're just so open to experiences, when they get on the wall and climb, every muscle in their body, including above the neck, is focused on how do I get the next hold. And sometimes they're holding on for dear life, even though they're only 15 feet above a carpeted floor in a climbing gym, right? And guess what? They're not thinking about anything else. They're not, in the adults situation, they're not thinking about paying bills on Monday. They're not thinking about the troubles with their boyfriend or their girlfriend or their husband or wife. They're thinking about holding on for dear life, even though, there's a carpeted floor 20 feet below them and there's a rope on their waist. So it's physical meditation. It's easy to focus. Someone might think, well, Hans, you're so used to it and you can probably like drink a beer while you're hanging off a handhold or whatever. Perhaps true, but I set a goal in climbing hard enough so that it draws my focus to it, right? We have ratings in climbing, like certainly climbing a ladder to the top of the house to put Christmas lights would not be difficult for me, but climbing a wall with quarters glued to that side of it would be very hard for me, and I'd have to focus my attention to do it. And it is just a brilliant physical meditation, and I think it may not be climbing for you, but you got to find something. Some people it's yoga, whatever, but being able to focus on that, you can realize, like, what if I turned off my email, turned off internet, and just focused on this spreadsheet, or just focused on getting payroll out today, or whatever it might be. You'd be doing the one thing, right, that needed to be done right then, rather than, oh, I got an email to answer. There's a phone call coming in. Oh, someone just instant text messaged me.
Yeah.
When you're climbing, there's place the gear in the crack. There's be safe so I don't fall and die. There's not, I turn my phone on airplane mode when I climb on El Cap for the most part.
So what someone just commented is you set a goal that's hard enough to draw your focus to it.
Exactly.
I love that. Before we wrap, I'm interested because several people have asked this question, fear. I'm curious what actually causes you fear, and when you experience fear, what do you do with it so that it's empowering and not debilitating?
I think this episode in May when I broke my legs is a great example. I had fear. Here I am in the middle of a 3,000-foot wall, and I don't have the use of my lower legs. And I'd obviously never been in that situation before. I had a lot of butterflies in my stomach. Like I kind of figured I wasn't going to die, but I knew there was a lot of pain in front of me in the next hours and days, if not weeks and months. There's going to be a lot of pain, and I guess that's fear that my life is going to be changing radically. And Abe watched me first front row. I used humor. I pulled up my phone and I started recording an Instagram story, and he was just like, Hans, what are you doing? Yeah, I mean, I had 60,000 views on me talking about my legs being broken in the middle of El Cap. So, humor and doing what you can do. I couldn't help Abe coil the ropes. The wind was blowing around. My feet were in agony. I couldn't help him lower me. I couldn't help him do it, but I could post a video on Instagram. So I did.
It's
humor,
one thing
I guess.
You could do.
Yeah, the one thing I could do was that. As appalled as Abe was at me, that's what I did.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, so many of us have never had to be in the types of situations that you've been in, and yet we all struggle every day to focus on what matters most, to get the most important things done. And I just love that you keep coming back to this message that no matter what situation you were in, there was one thing that you could do. And domino after domino after domino, over time, you've had an amazing career and have the opportunity to make an amazing impact. So I appreciate you coming on to share your story. For those of you who are interested in checking out Hans's book, On the Nose, it's available. You can get it on Amazon. On the Nose, is it onthenose.com or onthenose.book.com?
Onthenose.book.com.
And it's on Audible as well, which you can go to audible.com/one-thing, so they know that we sent you. And if you are not yet an Audible customer, you'll get it for free. And if you're already an Audible customer, well worth your credit. So Hans, thank you so much. I really appreciate you, man.
Thanks for having me. Been great.
All right. Have a good one, folks. We'll see you next month for our One Thing webinar. You can check it out at theonething.com/webinar to see what's coming up, register. And if you're not already subscribed to the One Thing podcast, please go ahead and do so. God, such a pretty cover. Look at that. Yeah. Awesome, man. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Take care.
Thanks all.